The best way to increase your chances of winning your 2023 Fantasy Football League is to find yourself a 2022 Josh Jacobs, right? A 2021 Cooper Kupp, a 2019 Lamar Jackson. The hardest part about it, of course, is finding that guy on a yearly basis. I've studied Josh Jacobs a lot over the past several weeks and months, and here's the thing. I think I have found my answer for who Josh Jacobs is going to be this year. So first of all, we need to remember something about this. What I said earlier about Josh Jacobs, Lamar Jackson, Cooper Kupp, when they all had their fantastic years, they were all fantastic values as well. Think about it. Back then, nobody thought much of Lamar Jackson in 2019. He was going in the 10th round of drafts right then. So you got him at an unbelievable value for what he produced at, right? And Cooper Kupp in 2021, he was in a situation with a new quarterback, Matt Stafford, and nobody was really drafting him that high. He was going in like the 5th or 6th round. The only reason I bring that up right now is because when you see who it is, nobody really expects much of him this year. And it's not like a lot of people think this guy's going to be bad, but nobody really has that high of expectations for him. He's actually starting to drop a little bit in running back rankings right now as far as who is going where in drafts. So when we look back to Josh Jacobs in 2021, it wasn't good, right? And the reason I want to look back to 2021 before we look at 2022 is because I want to see what the signs were, right? If there was any predictable signs that were going to tell us that he is going to break out, and how I can apply those to the guy I believe is going to break out this year, right? So that's the reason I'm going over 2021 right now. And when we look at it, it wasn't that great from a season-long perspective. 14.5 carries a game, 81.3 total yards per game, 4 yards a carry, 4.3 targets a game, and the running back 14 finish. So when you look at it, those were half PPR, right? And in half PPR, it wasn't like it was tremendous, but it wasn't actually that bad. The running back 14 finish was actually a decent finish. Where you drafted him, it was a lot worse. He was going in the 3rd round, sometimes the 2nd round in that season. So a lot of people were really angry with the production that they got for the value they got Josh Jacobs at. But I want to break it down even further into 2 halves of the season, so maybe we could see if there was a change in there or anything, right? So when we split it into 2 halves, we're looking at weeks 1 through 7, and week 8 was their bye week. So weeks 1 through 7, he had 12 carries a game, 62.8 yards per game total, 3.4 yards per carry, 3.2 targets per game, at 13.7 fantasy points per game, and he was the running back 18 in fantasy points per game in that time period. So what we could take away from this particular number right here is that 12 carries a game, he was getting a couple less carries per game in that time period, right? He was not seeing true running back 1 volume from a carries perspective. He was also very inefficient with the work he was getting. 3.4 yards per carry, that is not good. It's no wonder why the Raiders didn't give him the ball that much, because he wasn't efficient with what he was doing. Now, the targets per game, that's not bad at all. 3.2 targets per game is nothing to scoff at, right? But obviously, that number is going to go up in the second half of the season, right? And what we have to remember about this period of time, actually, with Josh Jacobs, was he was actually dealing with an ankle injury and a toe injury that held him out for 2 games during that time period, guys. So we are not looking at a guy who was fully healthy and just wasn't performing up to the standard of what we know he can. He was injured, and that was affecting his play for a couple of weeks after he got back on the field. So then they have their bye week in week 8, right? So then when we look at weeks 9 through 18, here's what happened. Weeks 9 through 18, 15.7 carries per game, 90.6 yards per game, 4.3 yards per carry, 4.8 targets a game, and he was the running back 12 in fantasy points per game during that span. So everything got better for him after that bye week. He was able to get healthy, he was able to get some time off and get off that ankle and that toe and come back after the bye week and be in really, really good shape. Handled over 3 more carries per game in that backstretch, had almost 30 yards more in that backstretch per game, and was almost a yard more efficient than he was weeks 1 through 7. So obviously, the thing with Josh Jacobs is that he was unhealthy at the beginning of the season. That week 1 injury he suffered stayed with him for mainly that first half of the year, and then he came back and was playing better football. So he ended the year on a much better note than what he started it with. And the point of showing that is because when you were looking at some of these guys who maybe didn't live up to your expectations the year prior, it's all based on interpretation and perspective, right? Because when you look at a guy like Josh Jacobs in 2021 and you saw what he did and where you drafted him at, you probably were not very happy with the production that you got and where you drafted him at. But if you drafted him in the 10th round, it's a pretty great move, right? But obviously, price is huge here. So entering 2022, Zamir White was a concern around the league. So everybody was thinking Zamir White is going to come in here and take away work. We saw what he did in the Hall of Fame game. And now, what do we do with Josh Jacobs, right? Josh Jacobs was plummeting after that Hall of Fame game last year. You could get Josh Jacobs in the 4th or 6th round, depending on your format you were playing in. It was great value. And the rest is history. Obviously, he was fantastic. Now, the running back I'm talking about here today has a lot of similarities here. There are lots of them. Weeks 1 through 7 for this particular running back. He had 9.7 carries per game, 80.9 yards per game, 6.1 yards per carry, 3.3 targets per game, and was the running back 24 in fantasy points per game weeks 1 through 7. So when you're looking at him versus Josh Jacobs in that time period, he had basically the same amount of volume, right? But he was way more efficient with his touches. And then weeks 8 through 18, something happened. He went from 9.7 carries per game to 15.2 carries per game, 87.5 yards per game, 4.7 yards per carry, 2.2 targets per game, and was the running back 18 in fantasy points per game. Now, what also happened in that time period was he went from having 44% of his team's carries in those weeks 1 through 7. So he was not the primary running back workload carrier for his team at that time. And then in week 8 through 18, he went up to 72% of his team's carries. So something major changed here. And what to also look back on with Josh Jacobs in his breakout season was he had a coaching change that he was dealing with. It was Josh McDaniels' first year last year that he was dealing with. This particular running back just had a coaching change last year as well. And similarly to Jacobs, this running back has a rookie running back in the backfield that a lot of people are worried about as well, and that a lot of people think is going to be more involved too. I think personally, by midseason, we will think that's pretty silly. Originally, there were 2 names on my list of guys here that I was thinking about. The first guy was Dameon Pierce, and then the next guy is the guy that I truly believe has that Josh Jacobs level ceiling this year, and it is Travis Etienne of the Jacksonville Jaguars. He is the running back 14 on Underdog, and he is going in the 4th round of drafts right now. Now, ESPN is a different story, right? ESPN, he's 25th overall and is a top 10 running back. So I'm not saying that he's a tremendous value, and that really excludes him from being a Josh Jacobs type. Because if you're drafted at the ADP that a lot of people feel like you may finish, like a Nick Chubb, right? Like a Jonathan Taylor last year, like a Christian McCaffrey, it excludes you from being a Josh Jacobs because you need to have tremendous value attached to the production that you're about to give. So I don't think that he's that on ESPN. But on a platform where you can win ridiculous amount of money in these best ball tournaments, this is a fantastic move. Travis Etienne, they moved off James Robinson, and that was the change week 8 through 18. They decided James Robinson's not doing much for us anymore. Let's just move on without him. And that's when Travis Etienne handled 72% of the team's carries. I personally think Tank Bigsby's not going to be much this year. I really don't. And I'm not going to deny that he will be involved in some form or shape. He was a 3rd round pick. I'm sure that they will want to get him involved at some level of some magnitude. I think the best outcome for Tank Bigsby this year is being a spell back. And also, let's look back on this, guys. Before Josh Jacobs' breakout season, the most amount of carries he had in one season was 273 carries in 2020. In 2021, before his breakout season, he had 217 carries. Who was coming in and expecting him to get over 300 carries, almost 350 carries in 2022? So my point in saying that is a lot of people look at Travis Etienne's volume last year as he had 220 carries last year, and they think No, it's not going to happen. He's not going to get that much more volume. I think he's going to make up a lot of ground here. That's where I think he has the Josh Jacobs level of upside this season, because I think he's also going to see a major uptick in volume. Probably won't get to 350, but I think he will get to 280 to 300 range. And his big playability is going to help a lot. He's obviously a very efficient running back, and his big playability is great. He had a 7.3% breakaway run rate in 2022. That was good for the running back 12 in that number. Josh Jacobs, 4.4% breakaway run rate. That was the running back 31 in that category. So my point on that is, even though he may not see the level of volume that Josh Jacobs got last year, he's going to make up for it for more big plays. And I also believe he's going to see at least 50 targets this year. Last year he saw 45. I think this team gets him more involved in the passing game this year. Lots of people are fading him, guys. He's a 4th round pick in massive underdog tournaments right now. He's got top 5 upside. I would do it, and I have done it several times this offseason, and I will continue to do it. I appreciate you watching today, and if you want to know who the Cooper Kupp of this year is going to be, click on this video right here.